What you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Sometimes, the people we think we know best carry the heaviest secrets, and Eleanor Mitchell was about to prove that to her entire family. That morning, when I entered the hospital room, I saw Eleanor Mitchell more fragile than ever before. This 78-year-old woman had raised three grandchildren single-handedly, faced every hardship life threw at her. But now, in that white hospital bed, she looked so small. Her granddaughter Emily was holding her hand, tears streaming down her face. Jake and Sophie stood silently in the corner of the room, their faces pale with worry. Eleanor's lips began to tremble. She wanted to speak. That much was clear, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. The doctors had said she only had a few days left. When Emily lifted her head to look at her grandmother's face, she saw something different in her eyes. This wasn't just fear of death. It was something deeper, heavier, something that had been weighing on her soul for decades. Eleanor took a deep breath and gripped her granddaughter's hand tighter. Her voice was so weak that Emily had to lean in close to her grandmother's lips. The first sentences Eleanor spoke shocked Emily to her core. Her grandmother was about to reveal a secret she had kept hidden for 50 years. Before we continue with this incredible story, hit that subscribe button for more unbelievable true stories that will touch your heart and change how you see the world. It was a cold November day in 1973 when everything began. Eleanor was 26 years old then, about to make the most difficult decision of her life. The baby in her womb was 5 months along. This baby wasn't her husband Harold's child. Eleanor was married, but her husband was in Vietnam, hadn't been home for months. The brief affair she had with a man she met during that time would change Eleanor's life forever. Eleanor continued through her tears, her voice breaking with emotion. When she gave birth to the baby, Harold still hadn't returned. She was alone in the hospital. The nurses told her the baby was beautiful, but Eleanor couldn't even look at him because she had to give that baby up for adoption. To save her family's reputation, to save her marriage, she had no other choice. But what they didn't know yet was that this baby would become someone extraordinary. Emily couldn't believe what her grandmother was telling her. Jake and Sophie had moved closer now, listening in complete shock. Eleanor's voice was getting weaker, but she was determined to continue. The family that took the baby was wealthy. The baby was a boy, and they named him Michael. Eleanor had only seen him once, right after birth. Then the nurses took the baby away and never brought him back. As the years passed, Eleanor never stopped thinking about that baby. When Harold returned from Vietnam, she never told him anything. Later, Emily's father was born. Then her uncle. They lived like a normal family. But Eleanor's heart always carried the emptiness of that first child. But astonishing revelations were about to surface that would change everything. The family thought they knew. Eleanor reached with shaking hands to the drawer beside her bed and pulled out an envelope. Inside was an old photograph and a letter. The photograph showed a young man. Eleanor's voice was completely gone now. But when Emily began reading the letter, everything became crystal clear. That baby Michael was now one of America's most famous technology entrepreneurs. Michael Harrison was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, and ironically, for the past few years, he had been developing technologies to help elderly people. Wait, let me tell you what happened next, because this is where the story takes an unbelievable turn. Tears were flowing freely down Eleanor's cheeks. Emily, Jake, and Sophie looked at each other, not knowing what to say. The burden their grandmother had carried for 50 years had now passed to their shoulders. Eleanor's final wish was very clear. She wanted them to find Michael and tell him the truth. But what they didn't know yet was that Michael had also been searching for his biological mother for years, and he was much closer to Eleanor than anyone could have imagined. The next morning, Emily couldn't sleep. She had spent the entire night researching Michael Harrison online. His story was everywhere. The adopted child who built a technology empire, the philanthropist who donated millions to orphanages and adoption agencies. In every interview, he mentioned how grateful he was to his adoptive parents, but how he always wondered about his birth mother. Emily's hands were shaking as she read article after article. Jake walked into the kitchen, where Emily was hunched over her laptop. His eyes were red from crying. Their grandmother's condition had worsened during the night. The doctors said it was a matter of hours now, maybe a day at most. Sophie joined them, holding 3 cups of coffee. They sat in silence for a moment before Emily spoke up. She had found Michael's company headquarters. It was only 2 hours away from their city. But here's what shocked them even more. The 3 siblings looked at each other. Should they really do this? Should they contact this billionaire and tell him that their dying grandmother was his biological mother? What if he didn't believe them? What if he was angry? But then Emily remembered the look in Eleanor's eyes, that desperate need to make peace with her past before she left this world. Sophie was the first to speak. She pointed out something incredible in one of the articles Emily had found. Michael Harrison had recently announced a new initiative, a program specifically designed to help elderly people in hospice care communicate with long-lost family members. He called it the Second Chance Project. The irony was almost too much to bear. Emily picked up her phone with trembling fingers. She found the contact number for Michael Harrison's company. As she dialed, her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. Then a professional voice answered. Emily explained that she needed to speak to Mr. Harrison about an urgent personal matter. The secretary was polite, but firm. Mr. Harrison was in meetings all day. But then Emily said something that changed everything. She mentioned that it was about a woman named Eleanor Mitchell in the year 1973. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The secretary asked her to hold. Emily looked at her siblings, her hand covering the phone. They waited in tense silence. You won't believe what happened when he answered the phone. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Just when Emily was about to hang up, a different voice came on the line. It was deep, measured, but there was something else there, a tremor of emotion. Michael Harrison himself was on the phone. His voice cracked when he spoke. He said he had been looking for Eleanor Mitchell for 20 years. He had hired private investigators, searched through records, but had always hit dead ends. When Emily told him Eleanor was dying, that she only had hours left, Michael didn't hesitate. He said he was on his way immediately. 2 hours later, they were back at the hospital. Eleanor was barely conscious, drifting in and out of sleep. The machines around her bed beeped steadily, monitoring her failing vital signs. Emily held her grandmother's hand, whispering that they had found Michael, that he was coming. Then they heard footsteps in the hallway, fast, purposeful footsteps. The door opened, and there he was. Michael Harrison looked exactly like his photos, tall, distinguished, with graying hair at his temples. But his face was different from the confident businessman in the magazines. His face showed vulnerability, fear, and hope, all at once. He stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the scene. Then his eyes fell on Eleanor. Even though she was old, even though she was frail, he knew, something in his heart knew. He walked slowly to her bedside and sat down in the chair Emily had vacated. What happened next left everyone in tears. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. She looked at Michael, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Her lips moved, trying to form words. Michael leaned in closer. He whispered the word that broke everyone's heart. He called her mom. That single word shattered 50 years of separation. Eleanor reached up with a shaking hand to touch his face. Michael caught her hand and held it against his cheek. She kept saying she was sorry, over and over, but Michael shook his head. He told her there was nothing to forgive, that he understood, that he had always understood. Michael told her about his life, about his adoptive parents who loved him, about his success, about his own children. But most importantly, he told her that he forgave her, that he had always loved her even without knowing her. Eleanor's breathing was becoming more labored, but she had something else to reveal. She whispered about the letters. In the drawer, she had written him letters every year on his birthday. November 15th. Emily quickly went to the drawer and found a box she hadn't noticed before. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to my sweet boy. Michael took one and began to read it aloud, his voice breaking. It was from his first birthday, telling him how much she loved him, how sorry she was, how she hoped he was happy and loved. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Eleanor gathered her remaining strength to tell Michael about his biological father. His name was James Crawford, and he had died in a car accident in 1974, never knowing he had a son. Michael nodded, absorbing this piece of his history he had always wondered about. But then Eleanor revealed something that stunned everyone. James Crawford had been Michael's adoptive father's best friend in college. The family that adopted Michael had known his biological father. It was James who had secretly arranged the adoption, wanting his son to be raised by people he trusted, even though he couldn't raise the child himself. The room was filled with quiet sobbing now. Jake and Sophie were holding each other. Emily was leaning against the wall, tears streaming down her face. Michael continued reading the letters. Years of love and regret poured onto paper. Each letter showed how Eleanor had followed his life from afar, celebrating his successes, worrying during his struggles. Eleanor's breathing was getting shallower. She squeezed Michael's hand one more time. She looked at her grandchildren and told them to take care of each other and to take care of Michael too, because he was family. The grandchildren nodded, understanding that their family had just grown in the most unexpected way. As the sun began to set outside the hospital window, Eleanor's breathing became more peaceful. She was surrounded by her family, all of her family, for the first time in 50 years. Michael held one hand, Emily held the other, and Jake and Sophie stood close by. Here's where fate showed its mysterious hand. Eleanor looked around the room one more time, taking in all the faces of the people she loved. Then she closed her eyes, a peaceful expression on her face. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm for a few more minutes, then began to slow. Michael never let go of her hand, whispering words of love and forgiveness until the very end. When Eleanor Mitchell passed away at 6:47 p.m. that evening, she was not alone. She was surrounded by love, by forgiveness, and by the family that had finally, after half a century, been made whole. But her death was not an ending, but a beginning. In the days that followed, Michael Harrison became a part of the family Eleanor had raised. He attended the funeral, not as a stranger, but as a son. He stood with Emily, Jake, and Sophie as they said goodbye to the remarkable woman who had shaped all their lives in different ways. During the eulogy, Michael revealed something that shocked everyone. For the past 5 years, his company had been developing technology for nursing homes and hospitals in the area. He had been in Eleanor's city dozens of times. They had probably passed each other on the street. The assisted living facility where Eleanor had volunteered for years had used his company's products. They had been circling each other without knowing it. But wait until you hear what he discovered next. The most astonishing revelation came when Michael shared something he had never told anyone. The reason he had started developing technology for the elderly was because of a recurring dream he'd had since childhood. In the dream, an elderly woman was calling out to him, reaching for him. but he could never quite see her face. He had spent his adult life trying to help elderly people because of that dream, never knowing he was actually searching for his own mother. After the funeral, Michael took the siblings to his office. He showed them the wall of photos, pictures of all the elderly people. His technology had helped. And there, in the middle of the wall, was a photo they recognized. It was Eleanor, taken at the assisted living facility where she volunteered. Michael had seen her picture hundreds of times without knowing who she was. The photo had been submitted as part of a testimonial about how the technology had helped the facility. Eleanor had been right there on his wall, watching over him all along. Sophie broke down crying when she saw it. The cruel irony and beautiful synchronicity of it all was overwhelming. They had been so close, yet so far apart for so many years. In the weeks that followed, Michael became a regular presence in their lives. He helped them go through Eleanor's belongings, sharing stories they had never heard, learning about the grandmother who had raised them with such love and dedication. He discovered that many of Eleanor's qualities, her determination, her intelligence, her compassion, lived on in him. Emily showed Michael all of Eleanor's photo albums. There were pictures of Harold, who had passed away 10 years earlier, never knowing about Michael. There were pictures of Emily's father and uncle, Michael's half-brothers, who had both died young in separate accidents. Eleanor had outlived so much tragedy, carried so much pain, yet had never let it embitter her. One day, while going through Eleanor's closet, they found another box. This one contained newspaper clippings, every article ever written about Michael Harrison. She had been following his career from the very beginning. She knew about his marriage, his divorce, his children, his successes and failures. She had been a silent witness to his entire life. The story takes another incredible turn here. There was one article in particular that was worn from handling. It was about Michael receiving a humanitarian award for his work with the elderly. In the margin, Eleanor had written in shaky handwriting, "My son, making the world better. I'm so proud." The date on the note was just a month before she had been hospitalized. But what they found next to it was even more remarkable, a ticket stub from the award ceremony. Eleanor had been there, in the audience, watching her son receive his award. Michael remembered that night. He remembered feeling a strange sense of being watched, of someone's eyes on him with unusual intensity. He had even looked out into the audience, trying to find the source of that feeling. Now he knew it was Eleanor, his mother, watching him with all the pride and love she had carried for 50 years. Michael created a foundation in Eleanor's name, the Eleanor Mitchell Foundation for Family Reunification. Its mission was to help adult adoptees find their biological families and to support elderly parents who had given up children for adoption. The first grant went to the hospital where Eleanor had died to improve their hospice care facilities. At the foundation's launch event, Michael told Eleanor's story publicly for the first time. He spoke about the societal pressures that had forced women like Eleanor to give up their children, about the lifelong pain of that separation, and about the healing power of forgiveness and reunion, even when it comes at the very end. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out with their own stories of loss and searching. Michael realized that Eleanor's story wasn't unique. There were thousands of Eleanors out there, elderly women, carrying the secret pain of children given up decades ago. But the most touching response came from someone unexpected. A week after the launch, Michael received a call from an elderly woman named Barbara. She had been Eleanor's roommate in the maternity ward in 1973. She had kept a secret, too. She had taken a photograph of Eleanor holding baby Michael, the only photo that existed of them together. Eleanor had begged her to destroy it, but Barbara had kept it, hoping someday it would bring healing. She mailed it to Michael, and when he opened the envelope, he saw his mother's young face looking down at him with such love, such pain, such hope. Emily, Jake, and Sophie became deeply involved in the foundation. Emily, who was a social worker, became its first director. Jake, a lawyer, handled the legal aspects of reunifications. Sophie, who was studying journalism, began documenting the stories of families reunited through their work. A year after Eleanor's death, they held a memorial service. This time, it wasn't just the four of them. Michael's children came miss. Eleanor's great-grandchildren, she never knew she had. Michael's ex-wife came to pay her respects. Dozens of elderly people from the assisted living facility, where Eleanor had volunteered, came to honor her memory. During the service, Michael read from the last letter Eleanor had written, but never mailed. It was dated the week before she went into the hospital. In it, she wrote about seeing him at the awards ceremony, about how proud she was, about how she almost approached him but couldn't find the courage. She wrote about the pain of loving someone so much, but not being able to tell them. She ended with these words that left not a single dry eye in the room. My dear boy, I may never send this letter like all the others, but I need you to know that not a single day has passed without me thinking of you, loving you, praying for you. I see your face in the newspaper, and my heart swells with pride and breaks with longing at the same time. I hope someday, somehow, you'll know that you were loved from the very first moment, and that letting you go was the greatest act of love I could give you. Forever your mother, Eleanor. As Michael finished reading, the room was silent, except for quiet tears. But these weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition. Recognition of a love so powerful, it transcended 50 years of separation. A love that had finally found its way home. The story of Eleanor Mitchell and her son Michael became more than just a family reunion. It became a testament to the unbreakable bonds between mother and child, to the power of forgiveness, and to the mysterious ways life brings people together. Sometimes the people we're searching for are closer than we think. Sometimes the love we're looking for has been there all along, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. In his office, Michael kept Eleanor's photo on his desk, right next to pictures of his children. When people asked about her, he would smile and say she was his mother, that they didn't have much time together, but she taught him the most important lesson of his life. It's never too late for love, never too late for forgiveness, and never too late to come home. The ripple effects of Eleanor's deathbed confession continued for years through the foundation. Dozens of families were reunited. Laws were changed to make it easier for adoptees to find their biological parents. And somewhere, Eleanor's spirit could finally rest, knowing that her greatest secret had become her greatest gift to the world. Emily often thought about that morning in the hospital. When Eleanor first started telling her story, she remembered thinking her grandmother was just confused, maybe hallucinating from the medication. She had no idea she was about to witness the unfolding of a mystery that had spanned half a century. Now, whenever Emily visited Eleanor's grave, she wasn't alone. Michael would be there too. Along with Jake and Sophie, they would stand together. This unlikely family brought together by a dying woman's courage to finally speak her truth. And in those moments, they could feel Eleanor's presence, finally at peace, finally whole, finally home. The grandmother, who had seemed so ordinary, who had made cookies and helped with homework, and attended every school play, had been carrying an extraordinary secret. Her legacy wasn't just the family she had raised, or the volunteer work she had done. Her greatest legacy was the lesson that love doesn't diminish with distance or time, that family can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the truth, no matter how long we've hidden it. As Michael often said in his speeches about the foundation, his mother gave him life twice, once when he was born, and again when she had the courage to find him before she died. Her story reminds us all that it's never too late to heal old wounds, never too late to speak your truth, and never too late to love.